All right. Welcome back to the Fully Human podcast, where we are having real conversations about the messy and meaningful work of being human. I am one of your hosts, Britt, and this is Sam. And today we're going to be diving into the topic of ego and kind of everything around the ego. So, Sam, what would you consider a definition of ego?
It's such a nuanced question, I think, because I think a lot of people have different definitions of what the ego is. From my perspective, I kind of see it as the psyche's way of operating in the world. It's its way of protecting itself from pain and also navigating the challenges of life. And so that can often look like from my perspective, what ends up being called your personality. So I don't see it as a bad thing. I think a lot of people see the ego as like, oh, I don't have an ego. I'm not an ego based person. Like they kind of like, that's not me. And I kind of see it as more like it's actually a natural part of the human psyche that we would probably not have survived without. But what do you think? Like, hear the word ego. What do you hear? What do you think?
Yeah, I love the question. I mean, the first thing I think of when I think of the word ego is that stereotype of like a guy with a really big ego and he's really like overly confident and kind of like showing off. That's honestly the first place that I go to when I think of ego.
Yeah. And I think that that's what most people would say. I think I'm just like, asked myself that question a lot of times and kind of like gone a little bit beneath that and kind of looked at how do why do some people have a bigger ego with your definition than others? Like why are some people more cocky and like kind of narcissistic and self-centered than other people? And that's where I kind of got into like a bit of a different definition, but I agree with you. I think that that's kind of how the general population would define ego.
Yeah, I love your definition of ego, and I think that definitely aligns more with kind of how important our identities are in keeping us safe and in just kind of helping us to navigate this world. I know for me personally that I won't use the word ego, but I'll use the word like self confidence has been
Mm.
such a big theme in my life where I've really had to, take messy action to kind of show myself like, oh yeah, you could do this. I get caught up in self doubt. And so I would consider myself someone who doesn't really have a big ego to a detriment. Like it actually holds me back in a lot of instances.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Well, here, let me look at it this way. When I looked at, okay, like why does somebody grow up and develop into a person who has a big ego with the traditional definition and somebody who's overly confident, doesn't struggle with self doubt, doesn't like need to filter or edit themselves, and might be considered more self centered? Like, how does somebody end up being that way? And what I realized is that most of the time it's because they're protecting themselves from pain, from a trauma that probably occurred in early childhood. And that's not necessarily like a big T trauma, like some big traumatic event. Oftentimes it's just a whole bunch of tiny moments where their needs went unmet, right? And I think it's really important to realize that every single human being, like we all have survival needs, right? They're ingrained into our biology. And I think we all know like the basics: food, water, shelter. But we don't realize that our biology is also wired for connection, for belonging. And that when we don't have connection and belonging, our nervous systems take that as a threat to our survival.
Yeah.
So it's like, think of the tribe, right? Like if you're ostracized from the tribe, if you're away from the tribe on your own in, the wilderness, odds are you're not going to make it because human beings survived in community. And so when we don't have that in today's world, which is extremely common, when our needs for feeling seen and heard and valued for just being who we are, when those needs aren't met, our minds find ways to protect ourselves from the intense pain that happens when we don't have that experience. And so I think it can kind of go in two directions where some people will have an inflated sense of self as a method of protection, and some people will have a deflated sense of self as a method of protection.
Yeah, that makes
So,
a lot of sense. I think I
yeah,
tend more towards, like, people pleasing as a way to fit in with the tribe, so to speak, rather than, the confidence and ego.
yeah. And I think that's common for women, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the narrative that women have been taught is if you want to belong, if you want to feel loved, if you want to feel like you belong and you are seen and heard and valued, help others, serve others, do good for others, and, kind of self abandon your own needs. And that's a narrative that is deeply ingrained into, I would say, most women's subconscious.
Yeah, absolutely. It really makes me think of this line, that everything is medicine and poison, when we're thinking about these two kind of constructs, right? It's like this ego can be medicine if you're someone who might not have as much confidence. You need to actually kind of inflate your ego, so to speak, where for someone else, they've inflated their ego so much that it's actually become
Right.
poisonous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a good question to take away from this to anybody who's listening is like, how do you figure out, am I coming from a place of ego or am I being an authentic version of myself? Like, how do you know? How do you even start to figure that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, it's a question I actually ask a lot. I have never really thought about it in terms of ego, but a question that I'm asking myself a lot is like, what is the energy that I'm moving the needle forward with? Am I
Mm,
trying to prove something? And often for me, if I'm trying to prove something, then I'm not coming from an authentic place. I'm coming from I want to fit in, I want to be liked, I want to be noticed, I want to be valued, whatever it is, whatever that underlying emotion is. But the driving force is not truly authentic. It's more of like I have needs that are not being met in some way, and I'm going to try to get some of those needs met
yeah.
by whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. How do you how do you know in your body, in your soul, in your spirit, like what that feels like to come from that place of authenticity? Can you speak to more of like what that feels like?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a pushing forward energy for me. So it feels
Mm,
like I am like pulling myself forward when I'm not being authentic, if that makes sense. It's almost like there's like tension in my chest and I'm like yanking it forward on a string. That's literally what the feeling is for me when I'm not being authentic. Whereas when I'm more in my authentic self, when I'm sharing something or expressing just simply because it's authentic to me, I'm more like relaxed in my energy and it's like I'm not pulling myself forward. I'm moving forward. I'm creating forward momentum, but there's no like pulling or tension in and around my chest, if that
mhm.
makes somewhat
Yeah, well,
sense.
it's a hard question to answer, right? Because you're trying to put words to sensations and feelings that are still complex and nuanced in your own experience. So it's not an easy thing to be like, it's this. I wish. Like, I wish it was that simple, but I try to think of it like I imagine myself in a room full of people. Okay. And if I am thinking about what they're thinking about, I'm probably in a place of ego. If I'm
Yes.
you know what I mean? If I'm thinking about, like, how I'm being perceived, how I'm being judged, what they're thinking about me, like, that's me being in a place of insecurity, and when there's insecurity, like, your ego's job is to protect you from that pain. So it's going to be the one driving the behavior, versus when I'm in a group of people and I'm not thinking about what they're thinking, I'm just in the present moment and, like, responding and reacting however it is, however imperfect or however messy I end up showing up, and I'm not worried about that, that's when I know that I'm being authentically me, because I'm not anxious about how I'm being perceived. And I use this example because I spent the first like 20 years of my life with like debilitating social anxiety. So
Me too. So I was literally just about to say, yeah, you're describing the first like 20 some years of my life. So
yeah.
that's so funny.
And that's the comparison that I think of now, where I'm like, there are still moments in my life where I feel that, right? Like I'm not fully healed of this social anxiety. It still comes up for me. And so I notice it, and like little behaviors that I'll be paying attention to are like, if somebody like says something and I can like quickly crack a joke and I don't like think about it and I just like kind of say what comes to my mind, that's when I know I'm comfortable, right? But if I like stumble on my words, or if I can't really like get the joke, or like, be quick-witted about it, that's when I know that I'm anxious. I'm like, okay, because I'm questioning what's coming out of my mouth before I even have a chance to like edit the behavior. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of my check and balance for myself, is how am I responding to the people in my environment?
Yeah. I love that. It's great timing for me too because I'm just about to go on a trip and I'm staying in a like a hostel type situation where there's lots of other people around and I feel the anxiety of that cuz I am like a shy introverted person. And I keep, like, looking at my reservation and being like, "Maybe I should just get my own Airbnb and totally isolate
Don't
myself."
do it. Don't do it.
I will not do it because I literally wanna go and meet people and make connections and, like, get out of my comfort zone, but I can feel that, like, anxiety already starting to build. It's funny.
And I'll kind of take this a little bit deeper using my own life as an example. So, like I said, I had really bad social anxiety for most of my life. I never really felt like I fit in anywhere, not in like my little neighborhood when I was a young child, not in school. Like when I got into high school, I never felt like I fit in. I always felt like an outsider. And so I was very shy, didn't really talk much unless I was like in my little close knit group of friends that I did end up, kind of finding by the time I got to high school. But for most of middle school, like I didn't have any friends. So it was very difficult for me to feel comfortable in groups of people. And so that like the deeper kind of root of that was that I never had that feeling of connection and belonging and safety that comes from that experience. And so my psyche created this ego of like being very shy, trying to be perfect all of the time, like over analyzing everybody's behavior, trying to know what they're thinking about me and what they're feeling about me all the time, being hyper attuned to everybody else's emotions so that I could, manage the room and make sure that I could be perceived in the best way possible so that I could get connection and get belonging. And that became a part of my personality
Yeah.
because that was just like the automatic programming that I started to operate with. And then as I got older, the people pleasing starts to become destructive, right? In my life, where you really start to notice how negatively that can affect you. You have friendships that don't feel real. You're in relationships that are toxic because you don't think that you deserve better. That's kind of how it shows up in your life. And then I remember kind of having, well, I guess we can call it an ego death, where I went traveling, and I've mentioned this previously, I went traveling to Australia and, like, kind of lost all of the external factors that were feeding my ego, right? I didn't have any of the relationships, and I didn't have any of the, like, identities or labels that used to reinforce this personality that my ego had created. Um, and losing that, or starting to lose that, was like a threat. It felt like a threat to my nervous system because my ego's job up until this point was to keep me safe, was to keep me from feeling the pain of the loneliness and the isolation and the disconnection. That's its job. And if it hadn't created that personality of people pleasing and perfectionism and over analysis and hyper attuned to the environment and self abandonment, really, then the overwhelming emotion and the overwhelming pain like would have taken me out. I would have not been able to function. So yes, it's not necessarily the healthiest place to come from, but it was also 100% necessary for me to survive. So that's why it's like, yes, it's a place that we don't necessarily want to continue to indulge in, but we also have to kind of give it a little bit of like, hey, ego, like, thanks for doing that for me. You kept me alive. So we love you for that. So you see what I mean? It's a bit of both.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's always the case of, like, the way that we're responding in the world is literally just the way that it is keeping us safe. It's just a protection, mechanism, and when we start to bring awareness to those protection mechanisms, whether they are coming from, us diving into the work or just something that's happened in our life that has totally shifted our perspective, then, we gain the ability to choose how we want to be and how we want to show up. And then I think those kind of mechanisms become like a barometer for us. Like I often know that when I am feeling more socially anxious, like, oh, I'm probably tired. I probably need to take care of myself a little bit more. Or in the case of going on this trip, it's like I haven't been on a trip in a little while, so it's just completely an uncharted territory. So it's like, oh, that's
Yeah.
a completely normal response from my body.
That's it, right? And I think we have to remember that is like this is a totally normal thing and totally human thing for us to be experiencing. Like I remember when I went okay, so I like go to Australia, I kind of like have the beginning of this ego death and I'm like super disoriented. I'm feeling super unsafe. I don't really know how to operate in the world anymore because my traditional operating system is starting to kind of like come into question and fall away and not really be working for me anymore. And then I came back to Canada and I remember being like, I don't know what the hell I am doing. Like, I don't know how to take a single step in any direction. I was so paralyzed by fear and uncertainty and like analysis paralysis because I was so mind based and my mind was just like going, you have a million options. How do you pick any of them? Like, I was so lost. And I remember becoming really aware of all of these patterns that my nervous system had created, that my mind had created, this kind of operating system, like I said. I was becoming really aware of it and all of the ways that it had messed up my life, had, made me do things that I'm not proud of, had made, I had made choices that I had to look back on and be like, that was really stupid. Like, that was really embarrassing. Like, and I had all this shame around it where I was like, all of the problems in my life are my own fault. I've done this to myself. And I got really, really stuck in that shame,
Mm.
And I think I really wanted to emphasize that because it took me years to start to really feel in my body and in my nervous system that that was actually a gift, that that was my mind and my body doing what it had to do to keep me safe. Like I shouldn't and don't need to feel ashamed of it. I should actually be proud of it because like I said, I wouldn't have made it without it. So
Mm.
it takes time, I think, but I think it's really easy to get kind of stuck in that shame loop of like, you did this to yourself, girl. Like, good job, you know?
Yeah, yeah, or just getting stuck in like this is just the way it is. This is just the way I
Mhm.
am. Like I always thought that like I was just an anxious person, just like awkward and anxious. And then as I got connected more and more to my body, to my breathing, to my nervous system, then it was like the social anxiety went away. Not completely, obviously. Like I just said, I still get anxious sometimes, but I couldn't function very well before, and now I have no problem, meeting new people and getting in uncomfortable situations. But I really did think like, oh, this is just my DNA. Like this is just how I am and how it's always going to be. So it's so interesting to have these things happen and then just be like, oh, that was just my nervous system protecting me. Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what that journey was like? to go through the process of recognizing that, wait, that's actually not who I am. I don't need to be that person. It's not hardwired. It's something that I can let go of.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think when I was going to a yoga studio as a student, I really noticed this shift because I would go to classes and like I would not speak to anyone. I would go in, like say my name and run to the studio and like do my class. And then after class, I would run out and like did that for months and months and months of like, I can't say anything. And if people would ask me questions, I would stumble over my words. I couldn't like talk, da 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 da, like all of these things. Meanwhile, I like secretly wanted to be a group instructor. Like I wanted to teach movement. I'm like, I can't even talk to these people. Like how how is that ever going to be a thing? And then I think after going to the same studio for so long, finally getting like I'm talking like probably a year or more of, going consistently, then I started to feel a little bit more comfortable. I'd have a few more conversations here and there with the instructors, with the owner and that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, it's like I'm getting more comfortable so now I can have this conversation with these people. Anyways, and then I noticed like as I started doing a lot more like mind body work, a lot more of just really tuning in like awareness work to how my physical body was moving. That really shifted the needle for me on my anxiety. I wasn't trying to change anything. I just noticed over time, I was like, oh, I haven't really been anxious in social situations in a really long time. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I was like, the only thing I've done different is like get more connected to myself. And it's really interesting because you'll notice like when you do certain nervous system work that people's voices will change after like a certain practice. And often that's like them kind of recalibrating. And you'll hear like from like a high pitched voice to like a lower voice. It's really, really cool. I've seen that a few times.
That's so interesting. I mean, I guess that makes sense, right? Because I even think, I've been in the service industry for years and years and years. And it's like when you have like your customer service voice, it's like 3 octaves higher. You're like,
Nice!
hey, everyone, how's it going? It's a performance in a way, right? Whereas when you're being a little bit more authentic, the timbre of my voice, especially, like, is more like it is right now. So that's really interesting. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, I
Yeah,
can see that can be something that you can pay attention to in your own life, right? Is like, hear the sound of your own voice.
yeah. And I was just gonna say, like, I notice that sometimes when I'm like in a shopping mall or something like that and talking to people in a store where I find like, with the lights and just all the people, like it can be a bit overwhelming. And I'll notice like, hi, da, da, da. I'm like, that is not my voice.
You're like, wait a minute, time
Like, oh,
out. That ain't me. Yeah.
yes.
That's a good piece to like a good anchor to pay attention to.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
wonder, okay, here's a little story time from my journey as well. I used to, like, again, super socially anxious. I used to want so badly to be invisible. Like, I just wish that nobody would see me. And I'm 6'1", for those of you who don't know. It is hard to be invisible when you're 6'1". So, and I remember just being like, I could always sense when people are looking at me. And I was just like, my whole energy was just collapsed. Like, please don't look. And this went on for years. And, as I got older, it got a little bit easier. But I remember being in my early 20s. Actually, I think it was more like late 20s. And I was working at this office and they did a lot of social media work. And the owner would always try to put me on camera. And I would be like, do not point that camera at my face. I want
Mm.
nothing to do with this. Like, do not put me on the internet. I want nothing. Absolutely not. Like, it was a hard no. And she was super respectful of that. But then, like, a year later, and this is actually comes back to you, my lovely friend Britt here sent me this post for a TV show for photography. And I don't even think you knew what it was, but I kind of applied on a whim and I ended up being on this reality TV show for photographers in New Brunswick. And I remember showing up on the first day and being like, "Oh my god, there's 4 cameras and they're all pointed at me," like, "Oh my god." I was mortified. I didn't know how intense it was gonna be, and I remember, like, the show came out and I was like, "Oh my god, this is my worst nightmare." Like, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe that I put myself on camera in a vulnerable way because I was showing my art and it was being judged, and it was like I had to be my authentic self because I was in a competition and I didn't have time to think about it. And
Mm,
so I
cool.
remember the show came out and I was like, "Oh my god." I think I watched it like this. Like I had it in my face. And then the episode ended and I was like, "Oh, I didn't die." Like, nobody cares. Like it was kind of one of those like disconfirming experiences where I did a thing that was really scary for me, and it allowed me to teach my nervous system that it was a safe thing to do. And that's a bit of an extreme example. Like, you don't have to go to that extreme. And if I had known what I was getting myself into, I probably wouldn't have done it. But the universe had other plans for me. So I think that's another way that you can kind of like start to challenge yourself is if there's a part of you that's afraid of something, whether it's being seen, being heard, like putting your art out there, standing up for yourself, like whatever it is, if you can find little ways to kind of just challenge yourself to try it anyway and maybe have some support around you while you do it, it can be a really, really great vehicle for your growth and for your authenticity because it allows that ego, which once again is just trying to keep you safe, to kind of learn that it doesn't need to do that.
Yeah, I have a question for you around this experience.
Yes.
Do you think that you have, like, because of other work that you were doing and just because of where you are in your life, like, do you think you actually did have more capacity to handle that experience than you thought you had?
Probably. Like at the same time, being a photographer, I learned a lot about the power of allowing yourself to be seen through a camera and through a lens. And so I was kind of preaching that to my clients. And it was kinda like I had to, walk the walk in this scenario, and so I kind of already knew that this was going to be a medium for transformation, but at the same time, I had already gone through probably, like, 3 or 4 years of deep personal work.
Yeah.
Like, it started with a yoga journey and like, similar to you where I was going to a yoga studio, and I used to walk in and hide in the corner and walk out, and then, kind of finding a bit of community through that studio. And so it allowed me to feel supported in this journey of like deep personal work.
Yeah.
And so this was like 3 or 4 years into that journey when I started to do this show. So I kind of had more tools in my toolbox, to breathe through the discomfort, to notice it in my body and not allow it to overwhelm me. But just as a reminder, like when I watched the show, I watched it with one eye closed because I was so uncomfortable. Like it was so so, like, yes, I did have more tools, and it wasn't something that I just kind of jumped into blind without any support, but it was also still super challenging. So,
Yeah, yeah, of course, and I think that that's an important point of, like, learning to understand where your capacity actually is and, not being afraid to push it a little bit because I think sometimes we're actually capable of a lot more with ease than we
yeah,
think, um, but, like, if we go past like, our capacity, then it can really just rattle our nervous system, right? Like, it's a great example of you were fine, you were fine. Like, yes, it was uncomfortable, yes, you had to watch it with one eye open, but your body was able to still stay, safe.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, and it's more like baby steps, right? Like, it wasn't that was the one of the first steps that I took in terms of, like, taking challenge on and putting myself in uncomfortable situations, and doing something like that then allowed me to do, the next big uncomfortable thing, which was to, move out of my house and into a van and drive across the country. So it wasn't like I went from 0 to 100. It was lots of little steps in between, and I think it's really not glamorous, those little baby steps, right? It's the consistent practice of coming back to your body, of to your awareness, to your feelings, to, the little moments of saying hi to people in the yoga room or, starting a conversation with a stranger on the street. Like it can be little things that kind of all add up to it as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's really, like, the unsexy part of all of this work is, like, actually doing it and actually noticing, "Oh, yes, my voice just went 10 octaves higher when I was talking to that cashier. What's going on? Like, why? Why am I in this situation right now?"
The other thing that I think this is like a really good way to kind of identify when you're coming from a place of ego is because the ego's job is to keep you safe. Safety in the nervous system means predictability, right? It means I want to know the right answer and I want this to always be the right answer because that's how your nervous system and how your mind feels comfortable and safe. It loves the known, it loves predictability. So, when you're in conversation with someone and they have a different point of view than you, they have a different belief, they have a different perspective, and it challenges what you believe in, you can always know if you're coming from a place of ego in that conversation if you are listening to prove them wrong or if you're listening to understand. That is the difference, I think. And that is not something that I think our world really talks about, values. Yeah, it's always debate, right? People are always like, there's literally debate team in school. Like, this is how you prove that one person's right and one person's wrong. And we're not really taught to value conversation and discussion where there's an openness, a curiosity to understanding someone else's point of view without having to necessarily take it on as your own or believe that it's right for you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens when you're deeply connected to yourself and your nervous system is you actually just don't really care if someone else thinks a different way than you. It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's cool. Maybe I can learn something from this person." And I think it's actually really important now because we're in these echo chambers where we can select what we see on our social media feeds, on our computer screens, just everywhere on the internet. We get to select the things that we like, and these algorithms actually feed us more of the things that we like and know and believe. So I think it's always really helpful to actually go look for stuff that you don't agree with and let it live in your feed a little bit, just so you can kind of get a sense of how other people are feeling and navigating the world and like let them live and be the way that they want to be. Like that shouldn't cause your system to totally melt down. And that's tricky because there are a lot of views that people do not agree with right now, right?
Yeah.
On
Yeah,
all sides of things.
we're in a very dichotomous place at the moment. There's this kind of like us versus them mentality, this like, very red versus blue, left versus right. Like that's so common. It's such a common narrative in our culture at the moment. And like I remember growing up, my family, we loved to debate. Like we would literally sit around the kitchen table and just argue. And sometimes it was fun, most times it wasn't. But I remember like getting older and kind of realizing having that moment of like, oh, not once were we listening to understand. We were always listening to prove each other wrong. And it kind of made me realize that we never got anywhere ever. We would always walk away from the conversation having gained nothing but an hour of stimulation and that rush of like adrenaline, right?
Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah.
kind of like in this argument, even though it's, your family members and you're like, you still love them. But I came across this framework. This was probably back in 2016. Have you ever heard of internal family systems?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember learning about that and being like, "Oh my god, this makes so much sense." And I think it's Richard Schwartz. I think
Yes.
he's the guy who created it. He talks about the capital S self. And the capital S self is kind of like equivalent to in yoga, like pure consciousness or the true self, right? Like, or that neutral observer that exists within all of us. And he kind of has these like, I think there's 7 C's, and they're like the 7 characteristics of the capital S self. And one of the ones that always sticks out to me is curiosity.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
when you're coming from a place of curiosity and not, again, like trying to prove someone right or wrong. Um, that's when you know that you're in that like true, authentic version of you. Is when somebody can say something that you fundamentally disagree with, right? Like I can use an example of like God is a punishing God. Like if you don't, abide by his rules, he will punish you. I fundamentally disagree with that. But I'm able to sit across from somebody and be like, "Tell me why you think that. What is it about that that resonates with you?" And it doesn't activate me. It
Yeah.
doesn't get me all like fired up inside to be like, "You're wrong and I have to prove you wrong." And I think that is always like an anchor for me where I'm in conversation with someone. If I can listen to somebody who has an opinion that I fundamentally disagree with and not get that like activated feeling in my gut of like, ugh, I gotta dig into this and like make sure he knows that he's wrong. If I can sit and not have that feeling, that's how I know that I'm sitting in a place of authenticity and capital S self. And that took me a really long time to figure out. Because it speaks to the capacity piece, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
going to be uncomfortable when somebody disagrees with you because your ego is going to be flared up. It's going to say that's wrong because that's its job. That's what it's supposed to do. And so it takes time to expand your capacity for discomfort in order for you to sit in more curiosity, I think.
I agree, and I think it requires you to get clarity on what you do actually believe fundamentally, because otherwise you can just get pulled around in the
Totally.
same way of like, "Oh, well, everyone thinks this, therefore I should also think this," or everyone I know and love thinks this way, like I've got to think that way. Like you can get really pulled around and you lose sense of what's actually true to you and what you actually believe.
I love that point. That is such a good point. I think when we are, young children and adolescents, we are sponges, right? We just absorb what's around us. That's literally how biology works. And so our beliefs are shaped by the people and the environments around us. And as you enter like later adult or later adolescence and early adulthood, your job is basically to figure out, well, what of that do I actually resonate with? And what of that do I want to shed? And that's a really hard journey. And when you stay in the same environment and with the same people that you've spent your whole life with, and you never expose yourself to other perspectives, other environments, other cultures, other points of view, you don't really get the opportunity to ask yourself those questions, to try on those different hats. And I think we really do ourselves a disservice in our culture by kind of teaching our children that it's like, middle school, high school, university job, because nowhere in there is there the opportunity to go discover what's right for you. So, like, how did you learn that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think traveling was a huge piece of it. I think that really um, always helps me just see how other people live and just be like, "Oh, other people do things so differently," and that's awesome. That was a starting point, I think, for me. It really helped me to gain more clarity on, like, what do I actually believe? And, like, I feel like I spent so long just, like, wanting to fit in and trying to fit in and doing a terrible job at fitting in. Like,
Same, girl. Same.
so at some point after all of that suffering of trying to fit in, I was just exhausted. I was like, why don't I just figure out what I actually like and what I actually want? And yeah, it's just trial and error, really. A little bit of traveling and a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. I For me, like, it definitely started with travel for me. Like I've said already, going to Australia was a huge game changer for me. But then when I came back, because I was such a people pleaser and so good at self-abandoning in order to fit in, which if anybody's familiar with Gabor Mate's work, it's like such a common thing for people to do, right? They take attachment over authenticity every single time because we need to belong before we need to be ourselves. So I was real good at that. And for me, like, I was in a relationship when I came back from Australia, and I had to leave the relationship so that I could be my own person. I had to figure out how to operate, how to travel, how to move through the world without having anybody else's needs or emotions to navigate. And that was really hard to do because I loved this person. I didn't want to leave the relationship, but it was this thing that I knew that I had to do for my own self development. And I remember this was right before COVID. And then when COVID hit, I kind of had the opportunity to start traveling by myself, just like within the province. And it was the most magical thing that I have ever done because it gave me the opportunity to challenge myself while I was doing something I enjoyed, but learning how to do it all on my own. And I had to learn how to decide what I wanted in those moments because I had nobody else that I had to accommodate. So that was kind of like my secret sauce was like going out and doing things alone. I started going to events by myself. I went to a concert by myself. Like I did things by myself and yes, it was uncomfortable and it was like not always an easy thing to do. There were a few nights that I spent in my tent where I was like, what the hell am I doing? This is terrifying. But it also gave me the opportunity to like do the trial and error and not have anybody else's voices to like contend with, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's super important for anyone who's a sensitive person as well,
Mhm.
because we are so easy to just go with the flow. It's so easy for us to just let other people take the wheel and we're along for the ride. And like we genuinely don't mind whatever is going on. Like we're typically pretty easygoing, flowy people. But we really lose the ability of deciding what we actually want. That's something that I've been experimenting with for a while of like just taking myself on little solo dates. Like this summer I went to a comedy festival all by myself and it was so fun. I had so much fun and I was like, this is amazing. I can do whatever I want. Like I don't have to worry about how anyone else is feeling, which I think is also like a sensitive person thing. So it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, I just get to figure out how I want to kind of drive the ship. It's very yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. And I think we're not really raised to ask ourselves those kinds of questions, right? Because we're always in groups. We're in groups in school, we're in groups in sports, we're in groups in play dates and all the things that we're doing as children. It's always, in a group of people in your family, whatever. And that's beautiful and that there's lots of benefits to that as well. But we're not really like taught that this is a thing that you should and can really benefit from playing with, right? And it's interesting because I think of, our adolescents, right? Like our poor, sweet adolescents in this country, in North America, really, we're really struggling.
Yeah.
Like the rates of anxiety and depression are through the roof and they've been going up and up and up for years. And it's not getting better. And I think a big part of that is because they're not really given the opportunity to individuate, right? They're given a one size fits all path. And this is what happened to you and I as well. And if you don't fit the mold, you're like, okay, well, there's something wrong with me. And we're not really telling them and teaching them that, no, this is a totally normal part of the human experience. And now is your opportunity to go out and explore and figure out what you believe, what you want, what you desire, what you think is worthy of fighting for, right? And so I hope that narrative starts to shift a little bit. I mean, I feel like less and less teens are like going straight into university these days, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah,
What's your pulse on that?
I think that's definitely changed. Like we're not seeing that same narrative of go straight to university. A lot of people are taking time off. A lot of people are just kind of seeing that there are other ways to make money and exist in the world, and I'm really actually ecstatic to see that change, and I think that's only gonna continue to, grow more and more. So that's a really cool piece of this.
I know, I agree. I also hope that, like, when you dive into the research on spirituality, I hope that, because there's this new trend, right, of, like, young adults kind of going back to church. I don't know if you've heard of that, but, like, more
Yeah,
people
yeah,
are starting
yeah.
to go back to church, and I think it's because in our adolescent phase, like, our brains are literally pruning themselves. So, like, once you reach, I think it's once you hit puberty, basically, the the brain starts to, like, strip away all of the excess things that it no longer needs, and you can literally see, like, the gray matter starts to decrease. And
Mm.
it kind of, to me, is the parallel of, like, the young adults and the adolescents learning to, like, strip away all of the things that they don't actually believe or want to keep, that they've been absorbing their whole young childhood, right? And so in that same phase, it's like, okay, so in this phase of life, teens are starting to ask the bigger questions, right? Like, what is the point of life? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Like, those questions start to come up as you're like, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step for me? Meanwhile, your brain is pruning all of the things that it no longer needs. So you kind of see the parallel there. And then at the same time, the spirituality research basically shows that, like, this is the time when, if teens have a some sort of connection to something greater than themselves, they have some, you know, it's not religion. They've separated it from religion in this research. But if they have some sort of connection to a community or a spirituality that's bigger than them, they are infinitely more protected against anxiety and depression. And so I really hope that as we move forward in life, and as, our world continues to shift and change, that the conversation of spirituality, of something bigger than ourselves, becomes more and more infused into the narrative, because there there is such a, I want to say, epidemic of mental health and substance abuse issues in especially that niche of the population, that spirituality can really, really speak to. And I know that it had helped me immensely. Like, I struggled so much with anxiety, depression most of my life. And it really has been my spirituality that has kind of taken me out of those dark places.
Yeah, so I've had a similar experience where coming back to my connection with the universe has been an extremely helpful tool as I've navigated challenge. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Cool.
Okay, let's see, what other questions can we ask ourselves as we learn to become more aware of our ego, become more aware of the, like, automatic programming that has been kind of infiltrated into our DNA throughout our early life. I think one that's really good to ask yourself is, like, what is it about other people's success, or what aspect of other people's success triggers you,
Mm,
you know? So, like, I'll give an example for myself so that people can kind of relate. When my friends, whom I love dearly, succeed in their own entrepreneurial endeavors, I notice myself get jealous,
mm.
because I want that for myself. And I struggle with that because of my own self doubt and my own self sabotage, which are all my ego trying to keep me safe. But I notice that in myself. And for me, it feels like that, kind of like my gut kind of goes, ugh, where I kind of feel like I just got punched in the stomach. And it's not a nice feeling for me.
Mm.
Right? So that's how I know that that's an area of my ego that I need to be continuing to work on.
Do you think that that's kind of guiding you to clarify what it is you actually want in any way?
I think what it says to me is that being having the confidence to take an idea and a passion and turn it into something tangible and real is something that my soul deeply desires, and I'm getting in my own way. And when I see other people not getting in their own way, I get jealous. You know what I mean? Which
Mm,
is, again, like it's just my ego, once again, trying to keep me safe as much as I want to punch myself in the face sometimes. Like, that is what it's doing. Um, and so it reinforces for me that it's something that I really want, but it also kind of mirrors to me that my biggest blocks are self-doubt and my self-confidence and believing that what I have to say matters.
mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful to recognize that. Um,
Shit
yeah,
ain't
and I
easy,
can
man.
no, I think super relatable. I think that anyone who has taken steps forward and who has a vision or a purpose that they know that they want to follow will relate to that. We all experience that and feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some way. Yeah.
I think another really good question is like, how do you protect yourself when you feel threatened emotionally?
Ooh,
Do you have an
that's
example for this one?
such a good question.
Mhm.
I mean, for me, it always comes back to awareness. It's always like if I have a moment where I'm completely protecting myself, which a lot for me, I'm laughing because it's like often if I'm protecting my feelings from getting hurt, it's I'm running away from the fight. Like if my partner does something that totally rattles me, I'm out of the relationship. I've packed my bags mentally. I'm moving out. It's
Ah,
over. I'm running away. So just kind of recognizing like when that's happening, that I can go a little deeper and be like, okay, what's the reality? Like, what are you afraid of? Oh, you're afraid that nobody loves you. Okay, great. So that needs to be sat with and held and supported and nurtured.
yeah. And I think when you really dig into these kinds of questions, most of the time, the root beneath the root beneath the root is I want to feel loved. I want to feel seen. I want to feel valued. Like, that's usually what it comes down to in some way or another. You know, somebody says something to you that makes you angry. The anger is usually on top of the hurt, which is on top of the like unmet need of I don't feel respected or I don't feel valued. You know what I mean? Like, most of the time it comes down to that. So whatever it is that um, you do to protect yourself, it's usually going to be, or I think the most beneficial kind of road forward is going to be to kind of keep pulling on the thread till you get to the unmet need and then do your best to try to meet that need yourself. And that is not an easy thing to do. Like, this is not a like, okay, got it, next thing, like moving on. For me, it's I'm still on that journey. I will probably forever be on that journey. Um, because yeah, like I tend to self-isolate
Mm,
when I get, emotionally threatened. I will, yeah, just completely withdraw and close up my heart and be like, "Don't even try. Don't even try. It's not even worth your effort because the door is slammed in your face, sweetheart. Like, bye-bye." And that's, again, like, beneficial for me if it's helping me stay safe and stay functional, because if I let the pain come forward, it would really be quite overwhelming
yeah.
until I expand my capacity to, hold the pain, which is a journey.
I think that's such a great point. I think that's a fear for a lot of people when it comes to getting into mind body work and to feel the stuff that they maybe haven't been able to feel. There's a real fear of like, if I open the door and let myself feel this, I'm not going to be able to function in my day to day. I've heard that a few times from people, which I think is it's really important on how we approach that, and you spoke to it so well here by just talking about your capacity. It's like when the capacity grows, you are naturally going to be able to feel some of the things that you haven't been able to feel. You don't have to try to feel the stuff. It's just naturally going to unfold. Our bodies are so intelligent and so brilliant that they're going to allow this stuff to come up in a way that's more palatable or more that it doesn't just completely throw us over the edge if
Mhm.
we allow the stuff we need to feel to bubble up naturally instead of kind of chasing it and digging at it and poking at it
Yeah.
to feel it.
I think that's super important, and it kinda comes back to the concept of you need to kinda, like, titrate this, right? Where you kinda let in drop after drop after drop instead of just trying to, like, open the valve and let it all rush in, because when you do that, A, your body probably won't let you, and B, if it does, it will likely overwhelm you, shut you down, and reinforce the idea that you need to protect yourself in the first place,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Exactly, and so I think for me anyway, I had it in my head that, you know, you learn about this stuff and how it works and how this kind of healing process goes. And you're like, okay, like, let's do this. Let's face it. Let's go. And you want to, feel it all. You want to get it all out of your system. And then you kind of like have to realize that this is probably going to take a lot longer than you want it to. Because I mean, I'm in my 30s. So it's like, it's been 30 years of this stuff bottling up. It's not gonna all magically resolve itself in 6 months, like, it's gonna take time, and to not feel for me anyway, it was really important to recognize the shame that came up with how long things were gonna take to heal and how slow my progress was going to be and how many times I was going to slip back into my old patterns, into my old protection mechanisms that I'm trying so hard to change, and to not feel shame about that and not beat myself up about that and just be more compassionate with myself and give myself more grace. And for me, like, it took me going to therapy for somebody else to see me in that messiness and be like, "Sam, you can give yourself compassion in this situation. You are not doing anything wrong." So if anybody out there is like beating themselves up about their progress or, how fast or slow their journey is going, just know that, like, I see you, I'm there with you, and please give yourself the grace to go at whatever pace your body needs to go at, because that is the only way you're ever going to get through this in the end.
And what's really cool is that when you give yourself the compassion and the grace and you allow yourself to move at the pace that your body and your nervous system want to move at, you actually get where you want to go a hell of a lot faster. It's so counterintuitive. It's so annoying, but I see this time and time again. Like when people can just be compassionate with themselves, give
Yeah.
themselves grace, follow the rhythm of their bodies, they're like, "Oh, here I am."
It's so true, Britt. It's so
Yeah.
true. And that's like 100% what has happened in my life. And it took me years and years and years of like seeing myself as a project and trying to fix myself and like trying to fix what was broken to finally be like, nothing's broken, Sam. You just need to be more compassionate with yourself and give yourself the space and the grace to like let it be what it's going to be. And that's when the movement actually started to happen and the shifts actually started to come. And so I so agree with you on that. It's so counterintuitive to what we're taught and how we're raised in this culture. But like that really is the magic. And I'm going to give this kind of like tool that I have found really helpful for me in giving myself self-compassion. Um I have this friend and she's kind of like my little sister. Like that's kind of the like energy that I have with her. And so if you can think of somebody that you feel like protective of, whether it's a sibling or a cousin or a friend or even a parent, where you're like, if somebody was speaking poorly to that person, if they were, you know, talking smack, if they were, physically assaulting them or like emotionally, verbally assaulting them, like I would step in and like knock that person out. Like there was no way that I would let anybody speak to her that way. That's just not acceptable. And like my like mama bear energy like comes in and I'm like, bitch, no, like that ain't gonna happen. And so whenever I like hear myself speaking poorly to myself, I picture her face and I'm like,
Mm,
would I let anybody speak to her that way? Absolutely not. And so I'm not going to let myself speak to myself that way.
yeah, I love
And that's
that.
kind of like the reframe that I have found to be really, really helpful for me.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just that's such a great a reminder. Like, if you wouldn't say this to your friend, don't say it to yourself. And I don't think that necessarily means that you let yourself kind of get away with things either. Like, there can be like an element of like discipline and like a momentum forward where you're
Mhm.
like really honest with yourself, without being such a harsh critic on yourself. Like, finding
Yes.
that balance
Oh,
of, because like right now, this month, I could like totally just lay in bed all day. That's like not what I actually need though, but I
yeah.
could. So there has to be like an element of discipline and like tough love without
Yes.
going too far into like criticism where it just holds you back and brings you down.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and let's see if I can kinda drive this home with, like, some real practical examples. Because there are days where I do lay in bed all day. I'm not gonna pretend that I don't, like, that's just facts. And I used to say in my head, "You're such a lazy piece of shit. What's wrong with you? You should be doing X, Y, and Z. Like, everybody else is doing all of these things. This is why you're so behind. This is why you can't, reach your goals." Like, all of those voices were in my head.
Yeah.
And now, and this has been, again, like the big shift. Now, when I'm like, "Oh, my body really just wants to lay in bed all day today," I do it. I don't let myself say those things. I say, "This is what my body needs." And if the voices come in, I say, "Hey, no thanks." Like, they're still there, but I'm just like, "I don't accept you anymore." And then I find that when I do that, when I wake up the next day, I don't actually want to just lay in bed all day. My body's like, "Okay, like, I actually want to move. I actually want to move forward." And so when it comes to rest, especially because I think our culture is very like, productivity based, and we don't really value rest, and we really shame ourselves for rest. I think I really like the reframe of, it's not have I done enough to rest, but have I rested enough to do my best work?
Yeah.
And that has been such a game changer for me, because now when I do take those actions and I do, move forward and have that momentum, it's coming from a place of like, I really want to do this, not I should be doing this.
Yeah,
And that is
exactly.
such a different energy.
Yeah, that's a game changer. One last thing around that, around rest too. I know this changed the game for me, but learning about my human design, and like the way that I function was so helpful for this in particular around rest. So I'm a projector, which basically means that I will get things done really quickly in like short bursts of inspiration, and I need a shit ton of rest. And when I started like understanding that and like feeling into that, I was like, "Oh yeah, like that is how I work. Like I will get this like bout of inspiration and I'll work like all day and I'll be super inspired. I'll get a ton done and then I want to rest for a while. And then I'll get another burst of inspiration and I'll just and so anyways, there was this whole like period of time where I was like, I need to have this consistent schedule. I need to be working from this time to this time every day. Da 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 da. I like to get the things done. And I was like, this is awful for me. Like it's not sustainable for my nature. So when I played around with actually just following my inspiration and trusting that, no, I'm not being a lazy piece of shit. I'm actually just listening to my system and I'm following my energy. Then I found like, oh, I was getting the stuff that I actually wanted to get done with the inspiration. And then I was resting when I needed to rest. And it
Yeah.
doesn't look like the 9 to 5 work week, the way that I move. So that really has been a struggle for me and still is honestly of like, how do I navigate this and how do I make sure that I am actually pushing myself the appropriate amount to continue my growth without being like a drill sergeant and just trying to should my way into what I'm creating.
I think that's so important, is that we just need to like take that word should right out of our vocabulary. It is doing us absolutely no service. Like, it is doing nothing but harming us, I think. And I think whether it's human design or or just like paying attention to your patterns, whatever it is, just like validate your own rhythms, right? Like the 9 to 5 is not, I think, even attuned to any human body. But if it works for you, cool. But like most of us, probably not. And that is so okay.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like this has been such a soul filling conversation for me. I hope that, something landed with all of you wonderful listeners out there. But I think that's going to be a wrap for today.
Oh, yeah, I have a new thing I wanna try at the end.
Ooh,
So
okay.
I just wanna know one thing that is bringing light into your life, as of lately. Could be big, could be small, just one little thing to sign off.
Love this idea. 10 out of 10 idea. Something that's bringing me light and joy. There's like a lot of really little things. Um, but the one that I think I'm going to say is I've recently kind of like reconnected with my passion for photography. And it's not
Oh,
that it ever went away, but sometimes I forget why I love what I do
yeah.
and the power and the impact that it can have in people's lives. And I just kind of recently refound that spark of like, this can really bring light to the world,
Oh my
you
god,
know?
yes.
Like
Yes.
that it's reminded me of kind of like one way that I can be a conduit or a vessel for the light.
Yeah.
It sounds way cheesier than I meant it to be, but
No!
that's
It's
what's been bringing me kind of this like spark again.
I mean, I'm so happy to hear that because I know it's been a struggle for you to kind of stay with the inspiration, and I'm such a big fan. Like, if you guys haven't seen Sam's work, please check it out. She is incredible. She has ruined photography for me because I don't want anyone else to take my photo ever, and she lives on the other side of the country.
I know,
So I
it's the
have
best
no new photos. I have no new photos because I will not get anyone else to take.
What a compliment. Thank you so much, Britt. You're the best.
Oh, you are
Your
welcome.
turn. What is bringing you light right now in this
Okay, mine
beautiful
is
world?
really silly, but it's bringing me so much joy. I recently got, like, hair rollers, like, the old school, like, Velcro hair rollers.
Like the ones where you like do your whole head and you look like a
Mm,
little alien? Yeah.
yes, so I recently got those, and I have really fine, like, kinda stringy, flat hair, so I never get any volume in my hair, and so I was like, "I'm just gonna experiment with these," and I've been just giving myself these little blowouts couple times, I've done 2 by now, and I'm like, "This makes me feel so happy." I just have, like, this little bit of volume not today, obviously, I'm in my usual slick back,
Yes.
but
I
it
love
has just been
that.
yeah, it's just been bringing me a lot of joy.
Like, I love that so much, and this is such a great exercise because honestly, like, the little things in life are what it's all about, honestly, and next time we come on to record, I wanna see that blowout.
Fair, fair.
Ah, what a great note. What a great note to end on. I love that so, so much. I hope that anybody who's listening takes a moment to just reflect on what's one little tiny thing that is bringing them a little bit of joy and a little bit of light. We'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.